myself a cup of coffee. Today, we are going to talk about the next stage in the transformation of Nehekara into Tomb Kings, and that is the treachery of Nagash. The fall of Nehekara and the tragic destruction of its people was brought about by the ambition of a twisted priest named Nagash. As the firstborn son of King Ketep of Gemri, Nagash was destined to serve in the mortuary cult whilst his younger brother, Thutep, ascended to rule following their father's death. Nagash was an exceptionally gifted student, and due to his talents and heritage, he quickly became one of Gemri's high priests. But this did not sate his thirst for power. Filled with pride and greed, Nagash coveted the throne held by his brother, and set into motion a plot to seize the crown for himself. Nagash began to corrupt the religious incantations of the mortuary cult, and he gathered together a dozen like-minded acolytes, of which a cruel noble named Archon was the foremost. One night, as the clouds covered the moon, Nagash murdered Thutep's bodyguard before entombing the young king alive within the Great Pyramid of his father. The next morning, blood still staining his hands, Nagash placed himself on the throne, and none dared confront him. The Arch-Necromancer. The reign of Nagash was a time of terror for all the people of Nehekara. The usurper king sought to increase his own power by means of devilish sorcery, a blasphemy that the people of Nehekara felt certain would incur the wrath of the gods. Nagash had learned the art of dark magic from a cabal of shipwrecked dark elves, captured and imprisoned within his father's pyramid on the eve of his funeral. Nagash tortured the pale-skinned foreigners until they divulged the secrets of their mystical powers, and he proved to be an apt pupil indeed. After only a few years, Nagash had surpassed his tutor's powers, and he destroyed them in a deadly magical duel as they tried to escape. Nagash began to experiment with necromancy, combining his mastery of dark magic with his knowledge of death from the mortuary cult. He committed his findings into 9 accursed tomes, the Books of Nagash, the most powerful source of necromantic magic in the world. One of Nagash's chief successes was the creation of the cursed elixir of life. With it, Nagash had finally unlocked the secret of eternal youth. He allowed Argan, his trusted vizier, and his other principal lieutenants to imbibe the elixir. It granted them immortality and incredible strength, but, unable to recreate the potion themselves, they were little more than slaves to Nagash's sinister will. The Black Pyramid. To increase his power and maintain dominance over the land, Nagash ordered the building of a vast black pyramid. Whilst the populace of Gemri believed this just to be another burial tomb, it was in fact a structure that would channel and harness the winds of magic to Nagash's every whim. The pyramid became Nagash's obsession, and its construction quickly drained Gemri's resources, forcing the necromancer to wage war to capture building materials and replenish his workforce. Nagash demanded great quantities of gold and slaves from other cities to be sent in tribute to Gemri. That which was not given freely was taken by force, and several cities were brutally conquered by Nagash. Marble, the color of midnight, was brought from afar, and innumerable slaves toiled day and night for 50 years until the Black Pyramid of Nagash towered above all other monuments in the whole of Nehekara. Such was Nagash's arrogance that he had built for himself a tomb that dwarfed even the Great Pyramid of Setra. The broken corpses of countless slaves were built into its foundations, and mystic sigils of power were woven into the Black Pyramid's walls. Even in the baking desert sun, the pyramid was cold to the touch, and not even starlight reflected off its magic-saturated surface. Upon its completion, the winds of magic blew more strongly across Nehekara, and Nagash's mastery of dark magic and necromancy increased tenfold. However, the tribute exacted by Gemri was so great that the poverty-racked cities of Nehekara had begun to fall into ruin. Eventually, the other priest kings rallied against the tyranny of Khemri. They refused to submit to Nagash any longer, and they began to draw their plans against him. The War of the Dead. To face the defiant priest kings, Nagash used his infernal powers to raise a legion of skeleton warriors. This was the first time that the dead were made to walk at the will of another, and the horror of it caused many mortal soldiers to flee before the undead armies. City after city fell before Nagash, and though the living warriors of Nehekara fought bravely, every soldier who fell only served to swell the ranks of the undead. Nagash believed it was only a matter of time before the priest kings relented, and bent their knees in supplication once more. But his arrogance was to prove his undoing, for he underestimated both their resolve and pride. After many long years, the remaining priest kings threw all their strengths and hopes into one final gambit, and the combined armies of 7 kings marched upon Khemri. It was not only flesh and blood warriors who besieged Khemri, for beside the priest king's armies strode towering statues. Faced with destruction by Nagash's sorcery, the mortuary cult had finally decided to take action and put their centuries of magical research into practice on the battlefield. In a grand ritual, they summoned the spirits of ancient heroes from the realm of souls, and bound them into the numerous statues that lined the passageways of the necropolises. The godlike Ushabti, towering necrolith colossi, and powerful Khemrian war sphinxes were awakened, ready to be directed to war. With creations such as these fighting at their side, the living warriors of Nehekara were emboldened, and they crashed into the undead legions with devastating force. After a titanic battle, Nagash's forces were defeated by the army of the 7 kings. Khemri was besieged and then sacked. Nagash's immortal lieutenants, who had taken refuge in the cursed Black Pyramid, were dragged out of their sarcophagi into the sunlight one by one, and executed by the vengeful priest kings. However, Nagash managed to escape before the priest kings found his tomb, thanks to the sacrifice of Archon, who stalled the attackers long enough for his master to flee. With a curse on his lips, Nagash vowed to turn the entire world into a kingdom of the dead, and traveled north to plot his revenge. Al-Qadazar the Conqueror. For hundreds of years, the priest kings continued to rule Nehekara, but the corruption of Nagash had forever tainted the land, and it never truly recovered. The individual city rulers had exhausted their populace in overthrowing Nagash, and they now had to contend with famines, civil wars, and marauding barbarians from distant lands. The treachery of Nagash had also tarnished the authority of the royal lines, and it was not until several centuries later that a truly powerful king arose. Al-Qadazar, a ruler the likes of which had not been seen since the days of Setra, ascended to the rule of Khemri. Under his wise and charismatic leadership, Al-Qadazar bound the great cities under his rule, and Nehekara began to prosper once more. The Curse of Lamia. The treachery of Nagash was hard to forget, and since his reign of terror, the mortuary cult was watched closely. The Lich priests were forbidden from deviating from their age-old lore of incantations, which had remained unchanged for centuries. However, the lords of the city of Lamia hungered for power over their rivals. They saw in Nagash's sorcery the means not only to dominate all of Nehekara, but also the chance to live forever and sever their dependence on the mortuary cult. To this end, they stole one of the blasphemous books of Nagash from the Black Pyramid, and over the course of centuries, they secretly became adept practitioners of necromancy. The Queen of Lamia, Neferata, embraced the malign magic and used her powers to consort with demonic entities. She created a tainted version of Nagash's elixir, extending her life indefinitely, yet cursing herself for all eternity. Not possessing the skill or knowledge of Nagash, Neferata and her court were struck by an unquenchable thirst for mortal blood. Lamia had become the birthplace of the vampires. fell creatures whose individual strength and unholy power were greater than that of a dozen men. Fearful that necromancy would bring about the wrath of the gods, King Alcatazar made war on the tainted vampire queen. Alcatazar gathered legions from every other Nehekaran city and forged them into a single-massed army that he led against Lamia. Thousands of chariots raced across the land ahead of vast regiments of archers, mighty phalanxes of spearmen, and battalions of giant war statues. Against such a host, not even the accursed vampires could prevail, and the power of Lamia was smashed. The pale queen fled, accompanied by those she had embraced into her cursed vampire existence. The Realm of Souls. The Realm of Souls is the revered afterlife of the ancient Nehekarans. It was believed that upon death, the deceased spirit would enter the Realm of Souls, also known as the Underworld, or the Netherworld. Here, the kings of Nehekara would reside in fantastic palaces until such a time as a golden paradise worthy of their status was prepared, whereupon they would rule for 1,000,000 years. It would be filled with all their servants, soldiers, and worldly possessions, and so these were necessarily buried beside their monarch upon his death. However, not all inhabitants of the Realm of Souls would be afforded such luxury, for in the lowest levels, the cursed and the damned would be subject to an eternity of torture for their sins. Only the wretches, the unworthy, and the traitors of Nehekaran society were condemned thus, and the idea that those of noble blood could be damned to such a fate was unthinkable. The Lich Priests of the mortuary cult believe that their magical powers originate from the Realm of Souls. With the proper incantations, the Lich Priests are able to summon forth the spirits of deceased warriors from this mystical plane, and bind them into corporeal bodies to fight for Nehekara once more. The dead return. Unbeknownst to the vampires, they had been guided by the implacable will of Nagash since their creation. Residing far away in his fortress, Nagashazar, amid the mountains to the northeast of Nehekara, the arch-necromancer recognized the spawn of his own ancient evil and was gladdened by the corruption of Lamia. Here were worthy champions, their damnation a tribute to his dark genius. Drawing them to him, Nagash welcomed the vampires, and they became his dark captains. Through them, Nagash began a new offensive against Nehekara, and the two sides fought numerous battles, the outcomes of which would pave the way for the necromancer's inevitable return. Beside the vampires came the dead warriors of a vast host, skeletons drawn from the tombs and cairns of the northern lands by the power of Nagash's sorcery. Nagash resurrected his trusted servant, Argon the Black, who won many victories in his master's name. War assailed Nehekara for years on end, and the land was irredeemably scarred. However, Alcatazar was the greatest general of his age, and he led the unified army of Nehekara against Nagash's evil for all their long years of battle. Under his leadership, the living legions of Nehekara never yielded, and finally, during the Battle of the Golden Skull, the undead hordes of Nagash were repulsed from Nehekara. The vampires scattered throughout the world to escape destruction, and without their magic and leadership, their armies of skeletons crumbled. Nagash had been defeated. There was much rejoicing throughout Nehekara, though the evil sorcerer himself still walked the lands. The vengeance of Nagash. Such was Nagash's bitterness, so great the potency of his thwarted ambition, that he chose to end all life in Nehekara, rather than see anyone else hold power over the land. He polluted the great Vitae River, poisoning it until it turned thick and dark, tainting the lands that relied on its life-bringing waters. Forever after, it was known as the Great Mortis River. Pestilence and disease ran rampant across the great land. Within a few weeks, those who had succumbed to the terrible plagues outnumbered the living. The city streets were choked with corpses as fully 9/10 of the Nehekaran population perished. Mourning for his lost people, Alcatazar sat upon his throne as his kingdom was destroyed. For all his skill at arms, he was powerless. Nagash's undead forces marched upon Khemri, brushing aside the city's plague-ravaged guard with impunity, and walking past the fortress walls and siege barracks unchallenged. His skeleton warriors broke into Khemri's royal palace and dragged Alcatazar away to rot in a dungeon cell. For the first time in centuries, Nagash sat upon the throne of Khemri. However, Nagash did not linger in Khemri for long. Filled with insane visions of power, he returned to Nagashazar and began to cast the greatest and most terrifying spell ever conceived. He intended to enact the Great Ritual, a spell powerful enough to resurrect every corpse across the globe and bind them under his control. With them, Nagash would command an unstoppable army of the dead that he could use to conquer the entire world. To power his great ritual, he consumed vast quantities of warpstone and summoned all the energy stored within his cursed black pyramid. As Nagash chanted within his fortress, the city began to darken. Oh my goodness, let me try that again. As Nagash chanted within his fortress, the sky began to darken for hundreds of miles around, and the ground shook. As his spell reached its crescendo, a great wave of power surged from the sorcerer's body, washing over the lands of Nehekara and stealing the life from everything in its path. Crops shriveled and animals perished within seconds. The last people of Nehekara fell to the ground, their skin withering as if they had aged a century in the blink of an eye. Within minutes, there was not a single living creature in the entirety of Nehekara. Such was Nagash's execration of Alcatazar, who had thwarted his plans for so long, that he spared the imprisoned king to witness the horrifying fate that had befallen his former kingdom. The death of Nagash. Whilst the great ritual scoured the land of life, some things remain undetected far beneath Nagashazar. While Nagash was channeling his great spell, drunk with magical power and lost in dreams of triumph, Alcatazar, the last immortal king of Nehekara, was mysteriously freed from his prison below Nagashazar by a group of hunched, heavily cloaked rat-like creatures. A powerful blade made of purest warpstone was pushed into his hands, and the emaciated king stumbled into Nagash's throne room, just as the sorcerer was reaching the climax of his mighty ritual. Through sheer force of will, Alcatazar summoned the strength to swing his baleful sword, and cut the hated necromancer down. As Nagash died, the energies of his accursed spell spiraled out of his control and swept across his homeland. Alcatazar, filled with horror at the obscenities he had seen, and having witnessed the death of his beloved realm, then faded from history. And I think we are going to stop there today because the next segment is finally the Tomb Kings awaken. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I would love it if you would leave a like or a comment or share the video with somebody. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye-bye.